So hi and welcome to our latest remote lounge. Today we're broadcasting from our Shoreditch office and I'm delighted to have Alistair Maston here with us today. And I'm sure you Alistair fans out there will know that we've done a few of these podcasts together. But before we get started, let's hear a little bit more about you.
Thanks, Gavin. Hi, everyone. Yeah, Alistair Maston. So excited to be here in person for once as well. I feel like we're always behind screens, so really exciting to be doing more of the digital side in person. As you know, that's something I'm hugely passionate about, virtual events especially, and I sit more on the agency side of things, whereas obviously you're a production company. So working on virtual events, hybrid events, all kind of digital video content, and passionate about most of them, to be honest.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for joining me. And I think the other thing to remember is to get people to look at your LinkedIn, because you've done lots of different podcasts, lots of training, tips and tricks for presenters, haven't you? So I think if anybody's out there, linking with Al, see some of the podcasts that he's done, because some great tips and tricks there.
You're right, I certainly do love to talk. And that's part of my brand as well, I would say. And I think this is where we collaborate best, because the speaking world and the events world always cross over. People are always asking for tips. So when you're putting someone up on stage, I think it's always good to have those in your back pocket and do things like this.
Exactly that. And I think even more so in the virtual world, isn't it, actually? Yeah. Because we're all very much on the camera then, it's all eyes on then. So the tips are really helpful for getting some great engagement and content across there.
And it's just practicing what you preach.
Yeah, exactly, which I probably should do a little bit more of as well.
You're great, stop it.
Anyway, so the last podcast we did together was fully virtual. And for that setup, we was using a little bit more of a basic setup and just kind of showing people that actually it doesn't need to be all glitz and glam to produce some great content. Actually, you've got some really awesome tools out there that can still do it cost effectively, but actually make it well produced, add some graphics, think about the content that you're showing, and you can still create a really, really great output at the end of the day using more of those cost effective tools there. As I mentioned today, we are in our Shoreditch office, and really this setup was more about to demonstrate actually kind of maybe taking it up a little bit of a notch there, but equally still making it cost effective. So this setup here can be recreated anywhere. All we really need is a good backdrop. But that can be a plain backdrop because we can always add some virtual stuff using a green screen, things like that. Some great props, so furniture, coffee table, things that actually we can either provide or normally things that are found in the office, use all that as props. Couple of cameras we have here as well. And I think actually we should be going to a little bit of a background shot so people can see what it looks like in the background and how we've recreated this. So couple of cameras, we've got one technician, and both of these camera feeds are being sent back to our headquarters, and then that's where it's all being cut. So really what we're trying to show to people there is we don't really need to send full production suite, full crew. We can do it really cost effectively. And the other thing that's really important nowadays is sustainability as well. So as well as budgets, as well as helping your carbon footprint, you can have a really nice studio type podcast broadcast, and it can still be done in a really cost effective way and produce a really nice output. So yeah, really this opportunity was just to demonstrate that. And of course, for us to sit on a sofa, be together and kind of thrash out some of the thoughts and our ideas that we've got, and really what this has kind of come about, hasn't it, from our recent podcast that we did. We actually both got some really great questions sent to us directly, and then we were talking about it. It was like, well, actually, rather than just talking about it and just having a chat, let's just kind of put us in a room and actually discuss some of the things, some of the questions that come through from the previous one.
Exactly, yeah. This is the follow-up, right?
It is, yeah, exactly. So great way to demonstrate what we can do, great opportunity for us to be together, and a great way for some people to kind of think about our thoughts. And also, I think what's quite good about us being together, there's two things, a bit of a generational gap, believe it or not. And equally, just like we were saying earlier, that different position where we are, you're a bit more agency based, where we're a bit more production type based, and actually, where we're both seeing really the future of events and really what the clients can be thinking about in terms of their strategic view, using more innovative tech. And the other big thing as well, I think you're probably seeing as well, is budgets is a big thing. Where before COVID, there was big budgets for events, And then because of COVID, people shrunk their budgets because virtual was inherently a lot cheaper to do, and those budgets haven't really come back. So what can we do to still be creative and using people's budgets? So I know that you've actually got the list of the questions, so we're kind of going to come to you.
Yeah, I have indeed. And I think important to say before we start as well, just what you're talking about there from different backgrounds, your production, I'm agency, the lines of those have blurred so much since coming out of COVID, because event planners got a lot more involved in the production because things weren't as complicated, they were a bit more straightforward. There wasn't, all this kind of equipment that, normal people necessarily don't understand. It was a bit more kind of accessible in terms of the software and things. So I think that provides a great opportunity for better collaboration and better communication, and hopefully this is a good place to start. But the first question, I think this was a comment that you got from a message on LinkedIn, was talking about how the lines of virtual events in general, and TV production are becoming so blurred, and how you kind of navigate that. You've already talked today, we're in a studio. This feels like a talk show, which is amazing, and I love it. But what kind of trends are you seeing in terms of TV scale production, but using that for events?
Yeah, I think really what we're all used to now, and it kind of goes back to kind of COVID also, the pandemic kind of sparked a lot of this, where, a lot of it was about video content and content creation. And I think people are used to now seeing kind of quite well-produced videos, and that's kind of become the norm now. So it's not really just about, I'm having an event, let's record it and that's it kind of done. It's about thinking about it differently, maybe what your output's going to be, what you can do with that content post-production. So giving a bit more thought with that, and then kind of jumping back to people used to seeing a lot more video type space, it's really, to me, a lot more about how we can do it kind of cost effectively, how we can do it creatively, how we can improve that output, because I think an improved output naturally makes it a bit more engaging. So utilising tech, it's not about just putting people in a room and therefore, that people are talking then. Actually, how can we think about the bigger picture? We've got some, maybe if we think of a face-to-face, we've got some really great minds in the room. How can we capture their discussion points and use it for the event, but then how can we use it post to kind of continue that education, widen that audience a little bit and kind of keep that event alive rather than just that one day thing. How do we keep it alive? How do we keep that education going? How do we keep that engagement? How do we keep people interested? And I think also nowadays people are kind of a lot, I don't know if they're busier or maybe there's so much virtual stuff and so many, people's time seem to be a little bit more stretched. And actually also just having choice now to access either the event, the content post seems to be really, that's a big thought now. Well, people should be thinking a little bit more about that now, rather than just that one moment. How can we keep it going for longer? How can we carry on with that engagement? What's your sort of views on that as well?
I always use TV, referencing TV and TV production as a comfort for some clients, because coming out of COVID and everything, the industry has massively changed, but people are wanting to do face-to-face. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes we're going back to how things were before, despite everything that we've learned and all the more sort of inclusive and amazing tech that we have out there. So sometimes clients sort of say to me, I'm not sure about the benefits of virtual versus face-to-face, and we might push for face-to-face. And I always talk about, virtual events are always around us. My favorite, Eurovision, is on TV. It feels like it is an event that's being broadcast. And it's comfortable for attendees. The virtual events have kind of been all around us. They're on a box that's literally in everybody's home. So it is actually quite a natural thing if you can make it feel not uncomfortable, make it feel produced, make it feel really tight and organized. I think the trick to unlocking engagement sometimes at events is making your attendees feel more comfortable. But I want to follow up because you talked about attention span there. This is something that constantly, again, clients, everyone's always asking. And I think there's a lot of buzz about in terms of attention spans getting much shorter. We've got Instagram Reels, we've got TikToks, all of those are 30 or 2 minutes long. So really, really short. Are you shortening events because of that? Or are you trying to accommodate things along the lines of making things shorter based on people being what appears to be more time poor?
And it's quite interesting, because we've got bite size and now we've got nano size, haven't we? And
Yes,
it's kind of like, okay, well,
that's a good way, yeah.
How small can we go? But it is that sort of drip feeding of information, isn't it? That kind of inspiring, sort of, generating thought, and kind of almost like that lead in to, oh, that's interesting. How can I find out more about it, isn't it? And we're all used to scrolling on our phones. Let's face it, that's what we kind of all do day in, day out. And it's about, to me, what's the hook?
Yes.
Almost, isn't it? Like, how can you pull bits of really great content? How do you generate that hook?
Yeah.
And then get people to follow up and look at it more. And I think you're right that there's sort of that broadcast TV type output. A lot of people kind of, might think, oh no, I haven't got the budget for that. That sounds like it's going to be really crazy expensive. But actually just kind of almost putting on some graphics on there, just thinking about the message, thinking about, what you can do with your phone, but actually just adding a good bit of lighting makes like a huge amount of difference. The kit that you're using, a microphone for it, having good sound, all of a sudden you're elevating it up into, something that's the next level. And again, I don't want to take away what we do in terms of the sort of full production there, but it can be scaled back. And it can be done really incredibly well. And I think it's also understanding your end audience, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you want that big glitz and glamour, then absolutely, big broadcast, full suite is absolutely the way to go. Spend a bit of extra money. But actually, maybe if you're thinking about a little bit more about that educational event, do you really need all those bells and whistles? Or rather than just sending people a PDF or a PowerPoint, read this, which is boring for everybody, let's turn that into a video. Let's turn that into a podcast. And actually do things like this, rather than just a presentation. Can we get a couple of people sitting together, having a bit of a discussion? And that's, to me, a little bit more engaging, make it more engaging, and it's easier to absorb if you're interested and want to know a bit more.
Definitely. And it's like your point earlier, the lifespan and life cycle of event is a lot bigger than it used to be, and there's a lot of ways to get inventive with all kind of different content types and things like that. When people approach me about the time question, it's obviously based on the kind of content and the specific to the attendees and things like that, but no one's ever suggesting that you make an event as short as a TikTok, but there's ways to like integrate that into your campaign, right? And I always go by the TEDx rule. TED Talks, as we all know, 7 minutes is the kind of allotted time. And that actually was based on a lot of research that went into it about that they did as an organization for attention spans. And that is roughly the average amount of time that your mind can focus on one topic. Does that mean your event is 7 minutes? No, it doesn't. But it just means you need to change things up every 7 to 10 minutes in the event and keep things exciting. That doesn't even mean changing topic, but it can mean changing a camera angle or changing the tone of the voice or something like that. One of the most simple production tips that I'm massively a fan of is camera angles, because a locked camera, if you've got an online audience watching a hybrid event, for example, a locked camera is not going to feel like they're there. You want a couple of angles, a couple of different shots, and even like a shot of the audience, like looking out from the stage to understand who's there, increase empathy. Yes, camera angles is one of my favorite things to talk about at the moment.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think, and also just like tapping into the audience. So it's not you're just watching a person kind of just sitting there, in a podcast environment, absolutely, but actually in that live environment where you are recording that live, to actually see the audience reactions to some of it, whether it be good or whether it be bad, sympathetic, empathetic, all these different things actually can just make you feel a bit more immersed in that experience. And I think also just that sort of bite-sized type of topic as well. And then it kind of gives people choice. Actually, again, when we're so busy, if we think about a live event and we might be broadcasting it, people at home aren't going to sit there for your 7 hours and watching that. They're just not. But equally, making it engaging and making it kind of a bit more choice-based, well, actually, I only want to really see topics, 2, 5, and 6 type thing, rather than almost forcing people to sit there for the duration. I think that's also really important, isn't it? Giving people that choice, they can dip in and out to the bits that they're really interested in, and then also step out, do their daily life, and then catch up on that almost at a later date if they need it by on demand. And then you're increasing your reach, increasing your audience. That person couldn't attend, but actually they did attend. They just watched it on demand. And also for your analytics for that as well. I think people kind of forget about the analytics side of it. which is really important, I feel, to actually look back and see, well, what topics people were really interested in and were really engaged in and want to hear more about, and what are the topics that people weren't really interested in, then why were they not really interested? Was actually the content not really that great? Was it not super interested in the way that it's been presented? Could something have been better rather than just death by PowerPoint? Could it have actually been animated? And, you know, there's and things like using motion graphics and stuff, you know, you can kind of dive in a little bit deeper and have a bit more insight into those analytics and kind of tailor your future messages accordingly. Like, was something missed? And that's the great thing about thinking about that life cycle of an event rather than just the one event.
Yeah.
Actually, did we get some really important questions that actually kind of were repeat questions? So obviously we really missed a topic there. You can then follow up, you know, do another sort of podcast type thing, add that on your on demand, and then kind of answer those questions all in one hit rather than addressing people.
Yeah, it's all about that agile approach, right? Like, gone are the days where you just capture data on the day of the event. You need to be getting that data and the analytics and the audience's input, you know, right from when it's being advertised, because your agenda might not be hitting the mark, and you need to know that in advance and amp up the things that people will enjoy much more. It's funny as well, because I think going back to the studio setup that we have today, some people sort of say, oh, but is that not moving on to being a hybrid versus a virtual? Which, again, the lines are blurred. It depends on who you ask in terms of the definition. But I think what we're saying is that you still wouldn't have to have all your speakers from this one room, right? It's about having a kind of host. Again, talking about Eurovision, that's how they do it, right? That's very well handed off between all the different remote countries.
Absolutely, and it's that mixing up, going right back to what you were saying, kind of mixing up your content and the way you're actually displaying it. You know, maybe having your host in the studio, and then you've got your remote speakers, you know, that might be broadcasting individually into an event or just out live. You can cut to them, and then you might cut to your live room, your topics there. All of that is increasing engagement, and it's kind of keeping it fresh, keeping it real. And I think that's what really draws people in, rather than just sitting there in front of a camera. Same old things, same presentations, you know, it's just somebody there with a load of words almost on slides. Mixing it up and mixing where your presenters are presenting from just makes it a bit more of an enjoyable watch. Yeah,
definitely. And then you have that guaranteed production quality of the one place as well, right? And that has excellent brand impact if it's sort of a public event, or, you know, there's always going to be that PR kind of impact from that side. Because, you know, even if someone wants to speak from home, you know, it's not guaranteed that they're technically kind of minded, and you can make that look as good as it can, but it's always nice to have that tight, clean, strong production quality representing the brand that's tying everything together. Yeah. I think an event host role is the most underrated role, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say. You know, that sort of basis, like you're saying, you know, a great event host can really bring everything together, make it super engaging. And also a great host is not just about speaking, it's about that host understanding the content, you know, and being able to pick up on that, ask questions on it. And it does kind of have that nice base. You know, we think about the news now, actually, and when we're watching the news, you know, so often they're cutting to the remote speaker, and they are on a Zoom, on a Teams call, or, you know, and they're doing it from home and they've got a headset on. That's becoming the norm now, where kind of pre-pandemic, you know, you would have a presenter there with a camera, with a lighting, you know, to go and interview that individual. You know, we've moved away from that now. Now we're interviewing from the studio. They're connecting from some of the online tools that are out there and having that two-way reaction, which makes it really easy for that end presenter because they're used to some of the platforms they're on. And I think it also takes off some of the pressure because, you know, even for us sitting here, we've got kind of all these cameras and all these, you know, and we're a bit more used to it. It still feels a little bit daunting. But if you're really not used to being in front of a camera and doing things like that, and then there's film crew there and there's lighting crew and there's all these cameras, that pressure can be quite on if you're not an experienced speaker.
I will say your team have eased that pressure for me though as well. I know you say we're used to it, this kind of equipment is you know, fairly standard for our role, but it feels very comfortable and it feels official. It feels very exciting to sit here in front of these lights. I feel like a movie star.
I like that, yeah. And it's good because it just shows that, you know, we've just kind of set it up here. And it's like, you know, we can do it anywhere where there's a little bit of space. And I think, you know, And I suppose that is that double-edged sword. One, it can add a bit of pressure onto some people, but equally, I suppose some people can give them that comfort factor that actually they haven't got to worry about their setup and they don't need to worry about how they look and what the lighting is. They can just kind of sit there, talk about, talk about and really focus on what they're good at, i.e., their chosen topic, without having to have all the stresses of, is my tech going to work? Am I going to look good? Do I need to worry about my internet dropping out and things like that? Let them focus on really why they're there to talk.
Yeah.
And especially in a paid environment as well, for a paid for speaker, you want to maximise your time with them and get the very best out of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was talking to a client the other day because they said kind of similar, it could be very intimidating being in a studio, and those kind of points were brought up. But another thing that we kind of thought of in terms of linking into that campaign and all that different bite-sized content is that we could do the same setup for pre-records, right? You could bring all of this, do some little PR posts, little, Vox Pop kind of videos, and have the same speakers almost, promoting their sessions so that they get used to it. Plus that's on demand, so you can edit it and then you can do a couple of takes rather than the live, and then it addresses that kind of comfort level. But I don't know, sometimes when you talk to clients, they almost expect you to just push them in front of a camera and be like, off you go then. It's really not like that. There is coaching, there is, testing and everything like that. Like today, we didn't just press record. There's been a pre-setup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's a really important thing, like that kind of Vox Pop, having that set up there. It's about, maximising that value as well. And thinking, again, it goes back to that strategic sort of thinking, maximising the value of we're there. So if we do go and set this up in somebody's office, well, you've kind of got us there for that full day, or lots of the time that's what you're paying for. So how can we maximise that value? How can we bring other people in? How can we get sort of B-roll? We use B-roll for clients. How can we get lots of different people kind of come in and speak? For us, we do a lot in the medical world. I know you do as well. Patient interviews are also really important and also can be really compelling in the medical world. So actually for us to go and set up at some practices, some hospitals, bringing the patients in an environment that they're used to and feel comfortable with, as well as having the backup, the nurses there, especially for some very sick people, can be, a not so daunting way for people to get their message across, especially with things like patient feedback and patient interviews. Actually for us to go there, maximising the value, get as much as you can kind of out of us, and the setup, I think is kind of crucial and key. But again, it's thinking about that bigger picture, isn't it?
Definitely. And what you said there, empathy about, or what you were alluding to in terms of the interviews and things like that. In terms of content, I think empathy, authenticity, all of that stuff at the moment is really key to like capturing an audience rather than just, sitting in front of PowerPoint and training and that kind of thing. People want to hear about or hear from the people that are on the front line. Yeah.
And I think that is really key, and that just, really, to me, that sings to people. And, and that just naturally helps that information be a lot more easily absorbed and just a bit more compelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And make people want to watch it rather than feeling like they have to watch it.
It's captivating, like it's appealing to the emotions, all the adverts that are out there and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a trend that I'm seeing, especially in the medical world, as you talked about for patients.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to our event life cycle then, because we always talk about events, and actually production doesn't always only apply to events. And a couple of questions that I got were, is it just for events? Could this be a podcast setup? Like, what other kind of content are you doing?
Well, I think the other thing we're thinking about is, like we talked about, video production. So people inherently think, well, I've got to have an event to educate people. Well, actually, you don't actually need to do that now. And things like using LMS platforms, the learning management platforms, is a really crucial thing that we're kind of getting involved in now. Recording, like filming interviews like this. Animation is another really important thing we're finding. Having it on either an on-demand platform for people to access or LMS type platforms has been really important. Kind of part of our journey as well, just not thinking about that one live event. Podcast, thinking about things differently is kind of really crucial. And when we also talk about media creation, it's kind of stepping away from that PowerPoint type approach as well. So we do things like with motion graphics. So people are presenting rather than just having your 16:9 screen next to you with a load of words. How can we use motion graphics to make things a little bit bit more compelling, and also having a bit more of a targeted campaign. So you might have your live event as such. So what's the follow-up? Do we then go on to some virtual type meetings, to have further debates about some of the topics? Can we lead into a virtual meeting? Are there further webinars? We talked earlier about audience feedback and maybe not kind of hitting the nail on the head with some of the topics or some things were mixed, getting that audience feedback and then having some follow-up sessions. And also I think people, again in the educational space, sometimes need to retouch on the subject. And certainly in our space, quite often the presenters then, post-event kind of get bombarded with questions, and actually rather than having to kind of re-ask those questions and contacting that person, having that content available for them just to re-watch it, I think it's kind of important there. So it's not just about the event, it's about the content that we're creating and we're working with our clients on, designing that with them, working out the output, whether we're filming it, whether we're animating it, whether we're doing things live. That's kind of the mix that we're seeing now. How is that kind of, as an agency point of view, how does that kind of fit into what you're seeing?
Very much the same. And it's about being creative. And I think as well, this applies specifically to the medical world, but there's obviously other applications. We talked about earlier, the patient kind of empathy or those stories. Sometimes confidentiality can come in and impact that and limit that kind of content. And something we found useful is having those stories done via animation rather than the patient kind of revealing themselves. So having a voiceover artist, take over that content. So it's still being shared, there's still that empathy level, but it's all facilitated digitally. It's a voiceover artist, it's an animation of the case. So that impactful story still gets shared without compromising anything. And it's just a level of that creativity, because I think some clients might be like, oh, we can't do that because we can't reveal the patient's identity or the individual's identity or the customer's identity, whatever industry it is that you're thinking of. And it's about having that conversation, right? Because a client might write that off before they've even voiced it to you. And it's like, please voice it to us, because there'll be a way around it that we can think of.
And I think what leads on to that is also accessibility and language barriers. So,
yes.
Making, by adding subtitles is a really great tool for people with disabilities or accessibility issues there, you're making that content more available. Language barriers, you're probably seeing it, a huge amount now with adding subtitles to it, different languages in it. And the other good thing about taking it to that animated type world is that then you can record it in any language. You've got your footage behind it as such, and then from there you can actually do your voiceover in whatever language you choose. And again, that's quite a cost-effective way, making it accessible. And certainly a lot of the clients that we work with, probably the same with you, are multinational. They're doing studies or they're doing events in all different countries. And it is a great way to make it accessible.
Definitely. Accessibility has so many tangents. Did a post about it recently, and loads of people collaborated on it and sort of gave me so much inspiration of so much different perspectives to look at it. Someone even said that just providing the content on demand and being able to pause it and digest that information, that is helping so many different people and different neurodiversities out there. So yeah, it's about considering that and making sure that content is captured, filmed. You can even add the captions in post-production if it's something you want to send out. So yeah, it's just creative. The lifespan's extended, as we've said, so.
And it's thinking about that bigger picture, isn't it, ultimately, and kind of working with people like us to think about some of these different facets.
Yeah.
If you're not really sort of in the game, it's not your full-time job type thing, then, how can you think of every aspect of it? How can you think of that bigger picture? And actually by working with us, with our experience, and the same for us, we can't remember everything, but actually having the teams behind us that have got those different bits of experience, I think are really valuable to reminding the clients what they should be thinking about and also what's possible there as well.
Do any clients ever open up and say, what's everyone else doing? Do you ever get that?
I mean, they kind of do, and they kind of, it's kind of like they're a bit shy to admit it. It's like they think they should kind of know it all.
Yeah.
And I think what's quite important to remember is actually none of us really know it all.
Yeah.
I like to think we're pretty experienced in our space, but we're always innovating, we're always seeing new things. And actually, even like when we're talking, There's insight that you're coming to me from an agency point of view that I hadn't thought about, and there's, like maybe a bit more tech production that you hadn't thought about. And actually having those conversations, that's what's kind of powerful, because there's some bits that the client are having struggles with that we haven't thought about as well. And if I kind of look back to when we kind of started, some of the accessibility issues that some people have as well, kind of taken for granted sometimes for some people. So actually hearing about some of the difficulties that some people face opened up our minds to kind of naturally actually start thinking about those things right from the get-go. And then that's kind of what helps you design your content and your media, to kind of thinking about that bigger picture there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I personally love a challenge as well. Like, I really want a client to come and be like, got this really new thing that I want to try, because I don't know, that's fun, that's exciting. Like, never be afraid to try something new or be the different person out there that is, not copying everyone else. And that's how trends are made, right? What's trendy currently isn't actually trendy, because the people that started it are already moving on to the next thing, right? And deciding what's going to happen. So I really welcome people to be like, we've got this lofty goal, how will we achieve it? And I will do my absolute utmost to achieve it with technology.
Absolutely. And actually, for you as an agency point of view, do you see kind of clients are really open to being innovative, and then they kind of bring it back, which is, it's kind of like they get scared a little bit halfway through. We do sometimes see that, they're kind of really open-minded to stuff, and they really kind of want to push the barriers. And as we kind of go along, they kind of get a little bit nervous about it, and then they kind of start to go a little bit safe again. Do you see that as well?
Yes, I think that at the start, you can talk about these lofty goals and going really bold with everything that will be done. There's definitely always some scaling back of that, because like you say, you can't have every bell and whistle, and I do somewhat agree with that. I'd prefer to have one flourish that works really, really well, rather than a couple that no one's in, the team have been able to dedicate enough time to make work. I think what it comes down to is like the nerves, right? These creative, different approaches. If a speaker is, doing that or leading it, which likely they are if it's something engaging or involving video content or something like that, maybe it comes down to that individual feeling sort of nervous and not wanting to break that mold and just going into no, I'll just speak and do PowerPoint. So I think that comes down to two things: speaker coaching, making sure they feel super comfortable and just getting really excited and enthusiastic with them, but obviously letting it lie if, someone's really not comfortable. Or then talking about bringing a professional in, like an event host that could run that on their behalf. Event hosts, they're not generic. They come in every single industry. There's so many agencies and sourcing bureaus out there that will match a speaker host with pharmaceutical or with automotive or whatever. You can get a specialist in that area. So it's not just an actor talking about it. They're a specialist, they understand the industry, and it will still be correct coming from them.
Yeah, and I think that's quite important. And we've seen it as well when we've got different hosts to do different things, and sometimes the topic's really important as well. We might have, we've got a plethora of hosts, mainly because we're a lot in the medical pharmaceutical world, and actually sometimes the topic dictates the host.
Yeah.
If we're talking sort of cancer, we need maybe somebody a bit more softer and empathetic, or if we're talking, maybe, some sort of blockbuster that's gonna, they might need to be a bit more upbeat. It's kind of, it's probably haven't described it too well there, but it's, it's a little bit, also just not necessarily matching the host, say, to the sector. It's about actually matching the host to the sector and the topic, which I think's really important there as well. And that host just having a natural interest in it, because I think that's what, or I've certainly noticed the difference, is that you can get lots of people out there that can do hosting, but actually people that are interested in the topic, generally they're a bit more engaged, and you can see it with them as well, can't you?
Yeah, I know what you were trying to say. It's like the levels, isn't it? You can't have someone being super enthusiastic and joking at a medical meeting. That's more suited to, like some kind of social event or something like that. So you need to match that kind of level and the professionalism as well that is appropriate for the topic and its delivery. The third question, the third topic area, I guess, that we've both got questions on, and you touched upon it a little bit in your intro already, but everyone's talking about this at the moment: budget cuts, cost of living crisis, certainly in the UK, making the money go further. What is kind of like your top tips for that, or what ways is there to be creative with sort of less budget and less scope?
Yeah, I mean, it's always really, really a tough one. And I think we have seen huge budget cuts, and that definitely has impacted what's going forward there. And I think it's all about getting sort of like bang for your bucks. And I don't know, it's sort of, a little bit of a sort of cliche when we say that. But I think things like utilising technology. So take this, again, I keep bringing back to this as an example, but it kind of really is a great example that, here we've just got a couple of cameras, a couple of lighting and one technician that kind of helped put it all together, and everything's being cut back in the warehouse. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we haven't got to take a load of equipment, we haven't got to take a load of crew. When you have people on site, you have to think about their travel and the accommodation, how we're going to feed them and things, all of those elements which all kind of add to the budget. So actually being a bit more creative in using technology, what's out there, can help budget hugely. Also, I think there's some really great tools in terms of being creative that are, they are a bit stock and they are kind of maybe a little bit stifled, but sort of understanding your audience, do you need that being sort of all bells and whistles, or actually can you use some of the sort of online tools out there to create some of your media? Can you use some of that stock footage? Again, with animation can be hugely expensive as well, but actually there's some tools out there. And I think it's also, when we think about the bigger picture, that sort of strategic approach, it's, do you really need an all singing, all dancing face-to-face meeting? Actually, would a virtual meeting be better? Or do we think about scaling back our face-to-face and then having that virtual session? So, understanding that sort of budget and then kind of carving it up to maximising the value. So rather than spending it all on one sort of channel, shall we say, we can kind of think about your end goals and actually how do we carve that up? What's going to be most suitable to your audience? And ironically, sometimes actually having an event as such, like a face-to-face, isn't really the best way forward in terms of what you want to get out of the message that you're trying to portray there to your audience. So I think that's where we need to be creative. And like I was saying, tech has got smaller now, it's got cheaper, and actually, we're used to scrolling on a phone and seeing well-produced videos that young people are kind of producing. And I think if they're doing that on their phone, we should be...
No excuses.
Yeah, there isn't any excuse for all of us, and that's the thing, it's about using the right sort of tools at the right time. But actually, what you can do with your phone is quite remarkable, but that's where you might need some creative input there, and that's where we can help. And again, it's that sort of mixing between sort of super budget friendly, with a little bit of production element there can make a huge amount of difference. Our podcast that we did the other day, was just kind of pared back, but actually a bit of graphics, great content in there, just us talking was like really effective and worked really well without kind of breaking the bank. And then from an agency point of view, what are you seeing in terms of, budgets and how we can help out?
I completely agree with you, to be honest. And I think we've talked about this lifespan, this kind of scale or campaign version of what we're seeing. And you're right, an event at the end of that might not be right. Maybe it's just, there's a couple of virtual seminars and then there's, a press release at the end or something like that. I think instead of the event, we should start thinking of the peak of the campaign. When do we want this to be the highest point? In terms of budget, it's just leverage what you've already got, right? Looking internally for those kind of resources, especially working with corporates or even, most companies now have a brand portal that you can access. There's so much video out there that maybe everyday employees don't necessarily know about. That's really good to repurpose instead of, like designing animation stings from the start. There's probably something internally that you can already use or any vox pops and things like that. Just leveraging that, but also leveraging the content. So if you do have an event, make sure you film it, make sure you record it, no excuses to not do that anymore. And then that can be used on your learning management system, or, it can be emailed out and be the post-event follow-up or something like that. And something I always encourage clients to do on site when you've got these kind of cameras set and stuff like that, why don't you do a little vox pop? Like tell people, because often we work in series, right? You might take that event, touring on a different location or to different regions, leverage that event day and the equipment that's there. Go and stand in front of that camera and tell the next people what they're missing and why they should come to the next event, because it's all here. You might as well use it. And to comment on you saying that this is, this equipment is sort of scaled back. It doesn't feel scaled back. Like, this looks beautiful. There's so much equipment. The backdrop looks amazing. And I think if we were sat right now in front of a custom stage set on bar stools with cameras pointing in our face, this conversation would be so different. It would not be genuine. It would not be authentic. And that is what the trend for content is at the moment. I said when we sat down, God, if you're sitting on a sofa, this is going to make me feel really honest because of the different environment we're sat in. Whereas if I was upright on a bar stool, having to like lean up all the time, that changes the content so quickly. It changes how the speaker feels, changes how the audience are perceiving them. So yeah, I'm all for this mode.
No, and I think that's a really good point. So leading on that, you think formal versus informal. What are you seeing there then? I think you probably answered it, but
yeah, definitely informal. Like, yeah, I definitely think people want more kind of casual, comfortable content. And I think crucial to that is kind of the outfit. I get a lot of people sort of comment, especially when you're tech behind the screen, you don't need to dress up. It might be like show blacks or like a hoodie or something like that if it's late at night, feeling comfortable. It's just portraying your energy and what you want, how you want to be perceived. A suit still has its place and formality does, but I definitely think that an audience connects and relates more to an informal kind of content and the barriers down, especially if someone's watching from home. They're not going to be sitting in a suit at home. They're going to be sitting, maybe in a t-shirt.
Yeah, in a couple of slacks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about matching those two vibes of the audience. I definitely think we're moving towards more sort of casual informal. What about you?
No, and I agree. And I think that kind of informality of it brings out your personality a little bit more. And I think that sings to people naturally. You know, like you're saying, I feel very comfortable sitting here, and if we were sitting upright and we had like the full shebang and everything was kind of all scripted and all purposeful, our minds are kind of just naturally thinking about how do we look? Are we coming across well enough?
Is it perfect?
Yeah, exactly. Is it perfect? Are we saying the right words? But with this, we've made, the way that we're talking, we've made a number of mishaps in the way that we pronounce things. But actually, that's really weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a normal conversation, you don't watch every word that you say, and you may not pronounce every word perfectly. And we all do that naturally. But if you're having a chat with somebody, in a meeting room, you don't pick them up and say, "Oh, you didn't say that correct." Yeah. And I think this brings out our personalities, and then that just means people that can relate to us a little bit more.
Yeah, that's it. It's relatability, isn't it? And that's not to say that you can't have peaks and troughs, right? It doesn't all need to be kind of casual. But if your agenda needs to be formal and have those strict presentations, then you need to throw in like a Q&A panel that's run from a sofa or something like that. Or, fireside chat, that's a real kind of buzzy word at the moment that's really good fun for like an informal kind of conversation. And just the peaks and valleys will keep people engaged, and then it also gives like a holistic perspective of the brand, the company, the speakers, etc.
Yeah, and I think we've got a lot to thank, like the TED Talks kind of also kind of made it a lot more casual, didn't they? That sort of, just having a chat with somebody, hearing, the real them rather than that sort of scripted, this is what I want you to see. Actually, no, and the Diary of the CEO and people like that is like, actually, we want to know about you, really. We want to see how you got to where you are, and actually, an informal conversation is one you're going to be naturally, talking more, and again, it's that little bit more engagement. So I think like the TED Talks is what's kind of aided that as well, especially for the big sort of CEO levels. Yes, there's still that time that they need to be in suits, and they need to dress their audience accordingly. But actually, we're seeing a lot more informal broadcasts and town halls for the CEOs that we work with in this kind of type setting.
I think working from home has kind of done that as well. Everyone's sort of more casual and naturally in their own home, more comfortable in their own home. And I think, that is honestly the crucial key to engagement, is making people feel comfortable. If you're relaxed on stage, the audience are going to feel more comfortable about submitting questions. I actually find it really daunting at a face-to-face event, putting your hand up to ask for the microphone, to ask a question. But if it's all a bit more casual, a bit more comfortable, they're probably going to feel more engaged and driven to ask that question and to get involved.
Yeah, I suppose it's that stupid question type syndrome, isn't it? Yeah,
and it's being recorded.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and if somebody's being
evidence.
Exactly that. So we all get scared about being the one to put our hand up. But you're right. If they're making you feel comfortable as an audience member, you're not going to be afraid to kind of type in your question, or vocalize your question. In my view as well, and that does relate to the live type meetings as well. But you're right, that virtual element is probably a little bit easier in terms of getting those questions across.
Agreed. And just topping off that conversation, I think sometimes if I'm doing a lot of pre-records and working with speakers who are, doing that on-demand content, or if it's simu-live for the day, sometimes when you tell them that you can edit it and you can do post-event production, that actually makes them feel more nervous. And so the same even applies for non-live content, to just go with the flow. Unless you say something completely wrong that will get someone into hot water, it doesn't matter if you're just correcting another word, or if you're saying, oh, sorry, I misspoke, it's actually, blah, blah, blah. That comes a lot more genuine. And there still needs to be that engagement, perhaps even more engagement for things that are watched on demand, because it's a lot easier to, minimize that, turn it off, do something else in the background. So I think the same applies for when you're being filmed, even if there is not a live audience in front of you.
Oh, and that's so true. As soon as we tell people it to be edited, all of a sudden,
you get a list.
You get a list of what they want edited, or it's like, oh, can we retake that? Can we retake that? And it's like, you said it perfectly fine the first time. Yeah. So that is a really good point. Actually, we all make mistakes at the end of the day. We all trip up on our words, and I think that's super natural to do that. But equally, what is great about a simu-live event or pre-recording it, if you do make a major faux pas, you do have that ability just to take that out. And I'm a big fan of that simu-live sort of feel. Live is really, really great. But I think with live, it is more that sort of somebody that's really comfortable with presenting.
Yes.
That's where live really does come across fantastically. But if you're not so much of a comfortable presenter, if you're not too experienced, simu-live can be great because you have got that safety net. Don't want to try and think about it too much. You don't want to keep thinking, oh, I can just edit that and we'll cut that out. Oh, did I say that wrong? But simu-live just gives you that safety net.
Agreed. And I find a lot of people as well, once they've been through it, we do a couple of takes or whatever. Once they've been through it once, they're like, cool, I'm warmed up now, so I'm ready to do my proper take, and that's the one that you'll actually use for the event. And I think there's sometimes a misconception as well. This simu-live, it's like, oh, why would they show up just to watch something that's being pre-recorded? I don't think that, and certainly I always do this, it's not that the speakers aren't available. They're going to be ready to do a live Q&A as soon as that's been broadcast, because that's the real, in my opinion, the best part of an event is to hear from the audience and hear what they got from it. So I don't think it's like cheating anyone in any way. It's just a way of like guaranteeing that production quality. It's a reassurance for the speaker if someone's nervous. It's very helpful for them. But then you still have them at the end, still there actively participating in the event and taking people's questions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point as well. Yeah.
And then the classic one that we had, a couple of people got in touch with both of us about this, which was, what trends are you utilising at the moment, excited for, that's coming up? Any instant thoughts on that one?
So in terms of, I think the biggest thing is like we're always hearing about AI and what AI can do, and I kind of almost don't really want to go into too much AI because as we've spoken about before, I do think it's a bit of a blessing and a curve.
Yes, a double-edged sword.
It is, yeah, exactly. There's some really great, powerful things that it can do, but equally, I don't think we should be relying on it too much. So, certainly in the events world, things like AI is great for analysing your data afterwards. It can be great for managing your Q&A. So rather than somebody, an individual there, kind of finding the most pertinent questions or the very similar questions about the same thing. AI can be really great for that. I've also seen it used in engagement tracking as well. So I've seen it used in like facial tracking. So it can it's been used to track the audience expressions, and you can kind of see the peaks and troughs. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So it's a great way to see if your jokes hit the spot.
And that's great for the speakers. Like they can move on and be like, oh, that really landed. So I'll do that again at the next one, or tweak. Yeah, that's good.
Exactly. So there's some good analytics that can come out with that. Obviously, the other stuff, it can help design your agenda. It can really help with delegate management as well, which is can be really helpful. You've got loads of delegates, things like dietary requirements, and kind of sorting that. But the next thing we've got to think about is I'm gonna make sure I say this right. Generative AI, and that's where it's going to like preempt what you need. And that is. Can be kind of exciting. So kind of acts as a PA. It knows from your schedule you need to be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's going to set your alarm for you. It's going to work out your travel, the best one for that day. So you're just going to get up at the right time.
Not have to think.
Not have to think. So again, it's kind of, one hand it's really exciting, but the other hand it could be a bit of a curse, because what if it gets it wrong? Which I think it gets better, it won't. But it kind of acts almost as a PA for you, and it's preempting what you're going to be doing. If you've got a project, for example, you want a new job, it's going to actually just automatically build a project timeline for you, so you don't have to do that. So that kind of preemptiveness of it is, because at the moment you have to ask it to do something, right?
Yeah.
I think kind of as we go forward, it's going to, you're not even going to need to ask it. It's going to start doing it for you. And kind of almost like, I don't know, Outlook and Word is kind of doing it for you. You've seen, you start typing, it's actually finishing your sentence for you already, which is, one hand, really exciting, really helpful. But it does kind of lead me to think that where's the future going to be? Are any of us going to have jobs? And then, of course, you've got the production side, the creative side of it, where it can do your timelines, do all your camera cutting. It can do that live as well, which is quite exciting. So that's kind of the AI type thing. In terms of tools that we're seeing, like for us, the remote working is a really big thing for us. And the fact that we can just send minimal crew. Utilize the internet, and actually if you haven't got an internet connection, so we've got, we use things like AviWare, so even if you're doing it in a remote space, or sometimes we're working in corporates there, they've got a really secure network connection, we can't just plug in, or you have to go through the world to almost kind of access it. So utilising technology like that. Also cameras are getting smaller, platforms are getting better as well, certainly for the virtual world, and a little bit more intuitive. The tech is kind of, in terms of like the individual tech, I don't feel it's kind of, it hasn't kind of come on leaps and bounds. It's just kind of finessing like what we already have there. And I think it's just getting easier to use, it's getting smaller, and just getting like more effective in terms of, what about for you in terms of innovation and tech that you're kind of seeing?
Well, it's always tricky because we've talked that we work in kind of medical space. I mean, call me a skeptic, but I always think you should be careful what you type into, Google, let alone into ChatGPT and other kind of AI tools like that. So we are using it a bit to like generate content and, project plans and things like that. Captions is the other thing that comes to mind. It's very good at captions, but it always needs that human oversight to have a look and make sure that, it's correct and interpreted correct. And there's many sort of different interpretations when humans do it anyway. So the accuracy is key. I liked what you said about the recognizing facial expressions. I've not heard of that. I'm excited about that. But on the speaker kind of level, there is many applications. I think PowerPoint even has this embedded now that you can get AI feedback about how you're doing as a speaker and presenting, which is really cool because you can encourage people to do that in advance so that they're getting some of that feedback already before the event and being able to sort of curate and tailor. A lot of what we talked about already, obviously I sit in the digital side, but I'm also on the program level of looking at actual event content and pairing that with technology and the digital tools that are out there. So authenticity is a huge one that I'm really excited about, making clients more authentic. And as we've already talked about, taking the PowerPoint slides down and, just being a person, because AI is, as you said, it's deep fakes and stuff like that. It's a minefield out there. So like what you can do to make a difference or to stand out is to be human, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, and that's kind of what I like the space that we're working with now, is because actually a lot of the clients now are starting to think about that bigger picture. And actually, for us, it's kind of like, we like to see the sort of complex problems or the way that people like to do it and actually trying to resolve those. That's what kind of makes what I think is really exciting now, and also thinking about like what we keep saying, that bigger picture type stuff. That's what I'm kind of enjoying is kind of providing solutions. Of course, we're remote solutions, so I've got to get that little bit in. But it's about providing the solutions, and I think that's really kind of key now is getting the clients to think about that bigger picture. Thinking how we can repurpose, thinking how we can utilise the tech in the best possible way that we can. And I think, that's probably been the biggest change that I have. Like I say, kind of individual tech as such, it's kind of at a really good level. But I think in terms of just the way that we're thinking, I think that's the ultimate change that I'm starting to see is how we're thinking about how we're utilising tech appropriately.
And I feel like everything integrates better nowadays. Everything seems to be a bit more like open source, API, a lot more kind of, it's kind of gone of the days, I think, especially when we started doing virtual events, you know, in the pandemic, when all of these kind of platforms came out, it was very locked to their solution, whereas now that doesn't happen. Everything integrates, PowerPoint especially, there's so many plugins, so many things you can pull in, and like, I think that's really nice to see that nothing's kind of locked as much as it used to be anymore. And, you know, if there is, you know, a strict rule, I see lots of companies that are only Microsoft or only Google things. There's a way to make everything talk, which I particularly enjoy because it makes troubleshooting so much easier, but it also makes a richer experience if you know something's really good out there and to integrate it with something else that needs using.
And I think, again, it's that kind of speaker, presenter comfort factor. You know, if they're used to using Keynote or Google Docs or some of the other great presentation tools out there, the fact that we can actually easily integrate them.
Yeah.
You know, before it's like, okay, well, I need a laptop for this, and I need to have a device for that. I've got to use a Mac for that. You know, and kind of getting it all connected. You're right. It was kind of, you know, from a technical point of view, it was a bit of a nightmare for us. But now, you know, that life is getting a bit easier. And because we can say yes a lot more, you know, and also that last minute yes. And, you know, I always bring it back now to that live event where the speaker comes to us, oh, I've got this that I want to do. Oh my God.
5 minutes before they go on stage.
Exactly, yeah. It was always
Here's my outdated deck on a USB.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my God, how are we going to do that? But actually using the tools now, you know, kind of having, you know, online data rooms that they can just upload it, and there's version control there, and we know that we're displaying this, you know, the correct one. You know, that's all pretty easy to set up now, and people are used to using it. And I think, you know, that's the other key thing is you know, where things are getting simpler, there's also kind of consistency in the way things work. So the way the platforms work, the way you're uploading data, you know, we're kind of used to like the burger menu for the further options. You know, there's kind of consistency there, isn't there? And I think that's all making it a little bit easier. And then if you can utilise the tools that the presenters are used to, then that's also another comfort factor, rather than, you know, giving them another tool. Oh, you have to use this. You have to do it like that. Actually, no, you do it how you're comfortable.
Yes, and we'll make it work.
And we'll make it work. Yeah. So it certainly makes our life a little bit easier, and just makes it a bit more enjoyable for the presenter.
And those content tools as well, even themselves, are like, you know, so diversing, and there's so many different things that you can do. Like I did a kind of workshop event recently where we did one of those whiteboarding things, and their slides were literally embedded in that, but there was all sorts of other things on the canvas that the virtual attendees could access while seeing, you know, the live stream from the hybrid. And I love a sticky note. I don't know, that's like just me. And so when they did like this board of everyone's ideas with sticky notes of like the virtual people doing it online and people doing it on their phones in the room, it's synchronous. It just looks so good on screen, and just, I love that you can bring those together digitally. Like I remember the days where it used to be like a flip chart on each table, and like, it just looks so much better now to be able to put that up on screen rather than have, you know, a tired flip chart. They're never attractive, are they? They're always pretty ugly.
And somebody needs to collect that data afterwards.
Yes,
somebody
exactly.
needs to type it up or do something with it.
Yeah.
But the beauty, like for me, you know, I'm not particularly academic. You know, I hate it when somebody asks me to write something down, because I'm like, no, I'm going to spell that wrong and make myself look a fool.
Yeah.
But actually, like pulling out my phone and just typing it in there, one, encourages me to do it.
Yeah.
Because if I have to write something down, I'll probably shy away and not bother doing it, to be honest with you. But if I can do it on my phone, you know, encourages me to do it. It's much easier then to sort and kind of manage from an analytical point of view, like live analytical point of view. And then you've captured it all, and you don't have to do anything, you know, with it, as you know, in terms of typing it up afterwards. So, and also we're just used to using our phone now, aren't we? And it's the same with, you know, I always think about polling. I remember the day when we first started polling, we had the keypads for everybody.
Yes,
exactly, yeah. And the guys in the office keep telling me I need to sell, you know, get rid of the ones we've got, and it kind of pains me to get rid of them, because I'm like, oh, that's kind of a bit
nostalgia,
of my legacy.
They're a relic.
Exactly. If I get rid of them,
I think you should frame them.
Yeah, exactly that. No, definitely thinking of doing that. But again, it's, you know, making it easy and actually making it cost effective. Pulling out your phone is just the norm now, isn't it? So, you know, and we can do so much with that.
Yeah, and like when you first had apps and things like that, there was always will everyone download it? I'm not sure. There was that kind of friction. That days it's totally gone, I think. And also that's the key to unlocking, if you're doing a hybrid, to bridging the gap between people that are online and people that are in the room. Like that's a really tough thing to do, and something like that is only going to help you if there's a way that people in the room and online can collaborate into the event. Then that's the first step, I think, to making it sort of interactive and breaching the border.
Yeah, definitely, and that always leads, you know, that's a perfect kind of segue in. You know, people always say to me, I want a hybrid event, I want everybody to have the same experience. And it's like,
tricky.
Yeah, it's like not,
if not impossible.
And basically it is. You are going to have a very different experience if you're accessing it remotely to those in the room. But what you can do and where you can bring them together is those engagement tools, and where you can get really powerful feedback. Those online, those in the room are going to be using the same tools to bring that in, and that's going to bring your remote audience in. And yeah, they're not going to have the same experience, but at least they're going to feel part of that meeting. And also, again, it's making the tools easier. Sorry, not just easier for people to use, but encourage them to use. Sometimes, and you've probably seen it on a virtual event, you say, "Oh, turn on your microphone" to anybody online that wants to ask a question, and nobody ever does, because it's like it's like picking up that mic. But if you're feeling your peers around you, you might be a little bit more encouraged. But if you're just turning your mic, your voice is going to boom out to a big audience. People definitely shy away from that. But so using some of those engagement tools, give people that facility to kind of step into that meeting, albeit virtually.
Yeah, agreed. Especially if you were unmuting as an online attendee to like a room, your voice booming across, I don't know, a ballroom.
Yeah.
That makes me cringe, and I'm quite an extrovert in the public speaking kind of space.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't blame people for thinking that, and it's just about giving that sort of passive contribution. As you say, everyone's familiar with technology, scanning a QR code, that's second nature to, if that's what you're doing, to have questions and things like that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Now, before we kind of finish up, I think I'd be interested to know, what are you seeing in terms of the trends, in terms of the type of meetings now, in terms of, we had face-to-face, we had virtual, now we have hybrid, as well as some of the podcast broadcast, what are you seeing? What are your clients asking for now?
I think current split is around 60 face-to-face, 40 virtual. Obviously, like fluctuating. If you'd asked me a couple of months ago, I would have said it's pretty much 50-50. But I think there has been, September, there's, at this end of the year, there's a lot of medical conferences happening, right? And I think there's something in the air about going back to face-to-face and tagging things onto those, making the most of people already being in person for those giant congresses that we have. In terms of like the specific types, just like you're saying, things are diversifying. So they might have a face-to-face event that's, the core of the content, but then when something changes or something gets tweaks, they have kind of this update meeting that's almost kind of podcasty. It might just be the one speaker taking questions and stuff like that, very conversational, but with some kind of content source of the updates. It's very efficient of people's time. There's such a mindfulness of people's time nowadays. Instead of going through everything again, it will be like, here are the key differences. So it'll be an hour rather than a whole nother summit to kind of talk about that, because I think there's more trust out there. There's more trust that people have already got this information, that they're digesting it and they're using it. I think from the working from home space, again, people are a lot trusted for having autonomy and things like that. Just to go back on the general trends, maybe this is not a trend, but it's becoming more socially acceptable. What we were saying there about people saying, I want online people and online people and in-person people to have the same experience. We're saying that's impossible. I think it's becoming more socially acceptable for clients to accept that that's going to be different. Worked a couple of times on not necessarily entire separate agendas for the online and the in-person audiences, but definitely having like subtle differences. Things like having, they've got an hour's lunch in person in the room. What are you going to do with your online audience? You can't just say, go and do something. It's about maximizing those times. So in those time gaps, we've been doing like exclusive online sessions to make the virtual audience feel, more included and more excited of like, this is exclusive because it's only happening virtually. So that's kind of fun. That brings some engagement. And I think, again, not a trend, but it's becoming socially acceptable, and it's not, people are like, oh no, same experience. It can be different, and it's noted that it's different.
It's like embracing the difference.
Yeah, I think that's
like,
smart.
Oh, no. It's embracing the difference.
Because when COVID happened, there was a big emphasis on just instantly replicating. Yeah. And then we went through the whole journey of like, that doesn't really work actually. And we're kind of stuck with this for a little while the pandemic was ongoing. So how can we mix it up? And then coming out of that, I think adapting to hybrid has kind of been the same journey of virtual's not going away. People, not everyone's going to come if we invite them. So how can we still get the content to them? How can we still get them to pay for a ticket and include them?
Yeah, and it's a similar sort of trend with us. Virtual events have definitely reduced now. Live events are definitely picking up, because I think people do want to actually socialise with their peers and see people and kind of get out there again. But equally, we are seeing a sort of live event happening, and we're seeing a drop off as we get closer because they know that there's going to be some sort of virtual element. So I think face-to-face absolutely is coming back. There has to be some sort of virtual element because people want choice. People do want to attend, but they can't because their schedule. And also some people are thinking, well, especially if I've got to travel it. Well, for a one-day event, I'm actually out the office for 3 days, and 2 of those are travelling where I can't really do work.
Yeah.
And that's,
it's the time again.
Yeah, it's quite painful for people to do that. And I think what's kind of crucial is what you were saying is that those update meetings. Go and have a look at the recording from the live, familiarise yourself, and actually here's the updates from that. So rather than having to, they don't have to go back, and obviously if they were there, they don't have to re-look at it, but those didn't attend, here was the live, here's the updates, or those people that were live, like you say, they just need to listen to the updates from that meeting rather than having to have a whole other meeting, drag people away from their work that they're doing now, and just, making it kind of a little bit more focused and more accessible and just relating to what people need at that point.
Yeah, same for us, those face-to-face events. I'd say 90% of them have an online joining option. Yeah. And you know what? That 10%, I'm not even mad about it because I think to stick and commit and wholeheartedly do a full face-to-face, have at it. That is a completely okay goal.
Yeah.
And that also, meets some event objectives of, again, talking about that kind of exclusivity of like, you can't actually watch this online. So if you're not fully committed, then don't come. And then you have to make that kind of sacrifice of, there might be less attendees, but we'll get more committed attendees that, can make that travel, and it will be a different kind of vibe. And then they might film it and have it available afterwards as their kind of hybrid approach. And, that works too. It doesn't have to be live.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good point. It's some committed events, we have seen that absolutely, is that, no, I don't want live because I want everybody there. I want to see people and I want them to have that. So I will, I'm not going to let it bother me if my attendance is low. Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. But equally, it's putting it live, broadcasting it, making it available, and maximising your reach. And again, by recording it, by kind of extending the life cycle of it, is that you continuously reach out to your audience. It's not about that day. Anybody can just drop in and look at the content at a later date. So you're kind of automatically maximising your reach there.
And even if you're not live streaming it, I would say still have it filmed.
Yeah.
Like insurance policy, for goodness sake, like why put on so much emphasis to an event and a day without like capturing that content and making it repurposable? Because I don't know, that's a lot of effort for something that's ephemeral, that's going to disappear. But maybe if ephemeral is the kind of vibe you want to go for, of like, none of the audience opinions will be captured, fair enough. But I still think it's a good insurance policy, even if it's just for the sake of your speakers. They might like to see it back.
Yeah, and it's certainly for us, when we go there and do a full production, we're just kind of adding a camera. When we've got all the mics, all the
not going to break the bank.
It really is a simple add-on, to be honest with you. And that's the thing. It's, whether you use it internally, whether you use it, externally again, you've got it for reference. And, and I think it's, like you say, nervous presenters to rewatch how they delivered it. And also just that Q&A type of thing. Yeah. Save somebody writing notes, maybe actually just have it recorded there. Can be really beneficial for that as well.
Or like a little show reel to advertise next time. It's like, it's always about thinking ahead, isn't it?
Exactly.
To finish us off, I have a question, but it's from me rather than an audience member. And I know this is something that you're passionate about as well. And I just thought if someone's watching this and they're new to the industry or they're wanting to get involved in the events, in production, in virtuals or whatever, do you have like one thing of advice that you would give them?
I think, for all of us, production company agencies, we're always crying out for new blood. We really are, because actually that's our future. And if I think, I like to think I'm pretty technical, but then you hear like some of the new things that are coming out and what people are doing. It's like, I thought I was pretty switched on. So I think all of us are crying out for new young blood. Reach out to production houses, reach out to agencies, because I think we all want a pair of hands. We just had a work experience person come in. They was with us for 4 weeks. And it was really great having sort of that input and that different way of thinking that haven't been kind of tainted almost by industry and, real life
They haven't seen
working.
The template yet.
Exactly that, And it was really interesting seeing, how he got on, and we had him like create a video of his time with remote solutions at the end, and he used vMix and he kind of recorded it all,
cute.
and it was really great. And just kind of, and also just his creative, the way that he was thinking about things creatively, was really interesting. So I think It's hard when you're a young person because actually, you know, when I was at school, it might be different now. I had no idea that kind of production things happen. I just thought it was all big TV and film. How am I going to get into that? But actually, you know, there are some really great opportunities out there, and I think, you know, look for AV production companies locally, you know, look for agencies because I would absolutely welcome people to be a part of that.
Agreed. Yeah, good advice. I would say like just there's so many like charity events, like go out and volunteer, like get involved because that will make you realise if it is right for you. I've said this so many times, but I think the events industry is like a bunch of weirdos that don't fit in elsewhere, and we've all come together and it's just this amazing accepting atmosphere, and it's amazing electric to be a part of, and also attend events, like go to events, walk up to the organisers and be like, how are you doing this? Take an interest. I think it's so flattering when people come up to you and take an interest in what you're doing, and it's showing that drive and that passion. And as you say, the industry is so open at the moment. Things are fully back to scale in terms of events, venues, whatever kind of area it might fall into. And there's so much creativity and life and innovation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the volunteering is a really key thing, actually. I know that you do a lot of volunteering as well. A really great way to kind of get your foot in the door and see what it's all about, where you can help, and you're doing a bit of good as well, which is always nice to see.
Agreed.
Well, I think we need to wrap up.
Yes,
today.
It's been such a pleasure. This has been so much fun.
It has been really good fun, and I think for both of us, we could probably talk about events. And
this is hour 4.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, how long have we been going for? So yeah, but no, it's really great to have you a part of this. Now we're going to do a few more of these going forward as well, and we're going to try and mix up the format with how we're going to talk to each other, just to kind of show different options and that as well. If you do have any questions, please get them in, because actually that's great content for what we want to talk about in the future. Please do link up with Al as well on LinkedIn, find out what he's doing, look at some of his podcasts and what he's previously done. Some really, really great, powerful tips there for speakers, and actually, you know, and how you got into speaking a little bit more and what kind of calmed your nerves and things like that, and some really great ideas. On,
this is not natural. Like it comes with practice. So yeah. And message Gavin if you want to be a guest as well. I'm sure you'd be happy to hear of like budding people that want to sit on the sofa and have a chat.
Definitely, yeah. I really, really, you know, I think kind of having stuff like this and being kind of inspired to what, you know, what other people are thinking is really, really important. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, come along and kind of sit on the sofa. We can come to your office as well.
It's very comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Come to you if you want, or we do it virtually. But no, thank you very much for listening today. Like I say, please do submit any questions that you have. Please do follow us as well. And thank you for your time today.